A young mother, she was pregnant, really short, tiny, fragile looking. Got up and testified to her experience of getting off the bus at the Wright State campus and then having to wend her way on foot over the I-675 overpass, which is a very busy overpass, which has no pedestrian sidewalks, no pedestrian stop signs, and yet here she was, a young, vulnerable, pregnant woman who walked that at night to an entry-level job and talked about what it was like in the winter when the roads were slippery and icy. She took her life in her hands to go to work. I looked at her and I thought, this is a terrible thing.
It seemed like you could come across the county line from Montgomery County into Beaver Creek. You get in the atmosphere, if you got your car windows open, you feel the temperature get cooler. It was just a frame of mind. You imagined it, but it actually did. When I first became active in the Chamber of Commerce in Beaver Creek, this was a farm field. 675 was completed, and the economic development expanded exponentially along I-675. And because of the attractiveness and rural atmosphere of Beaver Creek, people wanted to move out of what was considered then the downtown of Dayton and move into Beaver Creek. Out here, you live on half-acre lots, and you've got space, you got elbow room. That's what people wanted. And other areas that were fields now are built up with homes.
I moved here in '85. I saw Beaver Creek as a place where families really cared about kids and people. I viewed it as my hometown and a place to thrive. My neighbors are nice, and we have community events, and we care about, So there's a lot of good things that happen in Beaver Creek.
The population has increased by almost 40,000. We're approaching, in Beaver Creek, 50,000 population. The contractors have just gone crazy in development.
Beaver Creek is a great location, so developers want to put things here.
Particularly along I-675. Two of the largest major shopping centers are both located in Beaver Creek. We have the mall at Fairfield Commons, and we have the Green. Consequently, both of them are right off of Route 675.
I think that you get so much accomplished when people take pride in their community and they care. All that community pride made a positive difference, and I think paid off very well. Now we've got commercial, we've got good housing, we've got excellent schools. Beaver Creek was selected to be one of the top 100 cities in the nation.
Number 84. Quite frankly, we don't go to Montgomery County much anymore.
Beaver Creek's growing up. Do it at home.
You can do it right here in your own backyard. And yeah, I'm happy with the way it is.
What the Industrial Revolution gave us was an elevator to match the middle class. We lost that elevator when industry took a downturn. Chrysler and General Motors and the Dayton Tire and Rubber Company, and NCR was another one. We thought that the goose that laid the golden egg would never fly out, and it did. All the schools and all the access, even mom and pop businesses started moving. They decided it wasn't worth staying in Dayton because there was no plan to keep this part of Dayton that had made so much money for so many to leave it vibrant enough to survive on its own. But we lost it all. And so if I'm coming and I'm an investor and I want to see where all your growth is happening, where your school districts are growing, investors decided if it's not near 675, then it wasn't important. We weren't worth investing in. Well, people that live in Dayton still want to feel safe. They want an opportunity to elevate their lives, to get a quality education. They're competing for jobs that they can barely get access to here now. Where do you go to get those jobs? Continually, they get further and further away from the city where the people live at. Because the type of jobs that they seek aren't here. It's around 675. So it shouldn't be a crime that you can't afford an automobile. And until you get to the point where you can get an automobile, you need some way of sustaining yourself to give your family hope, the hope that Dayton is making a comeback. And we educate our children every day with the hope that they too can live this American dream. But when they look at their neighborhood they live in, they don't see the same America as they do around 675.
LEAD is Leaders for Equality and Action in Dayton. And LEAD is out to make a better, in this case, Montgomery County, City of Dayton, a better place for the multicultural that's here.
It's a community organization composed of the social action committees of a bunch of local churches. White churches, black churches, churches from all around the area.
And LEAD is a proactive system, speaking up for persons who don't have a voice for themselves and getting people to realize that when we all get together and we all speak with one voice, that people listen.
They put their heads together and decide and look at problems in the community and decide which of those that they want to take on.
We have what we call a problems assembly. We gather persons from the neighborhoods and ask, what wakes you up at night? What keeps you up at night when you think about injustice?
At some point, a few years ago, they decided that access to transportation and transportation equity was an important issue that they wanted to get involved in. They noticed one particularly outrageous example of access to transportation being denied. And that was the situation in Beaver Creek.
I got a call from somebody saying they were with a group called LEAD, which I had never heard of, actually. And they said they had some issues they wanted to discuss with RTA, and they really needed me to come to a meeting. And so I said, sure. And the meeting was held on the west side here. And I arrived that night, and it was a gridlock. And there were several hundred people when I got to the church, and when I tried to get into church, they said, oh, no, are you Mark from RTA? I said, yes. They said, no, you come with us. I thought, oh my God, what's going on here?
In this church, the church was full. 2 Hispanic women got up, we had a translator for them, and they were young. One was pregnant, actually.
And told the story of walking every day, from Colonel Glenn Highway through the snow to a lousy minimum wage job on Pentagon Boulevard.
We were just like stunned by what we heard, and we were all very emotionally affected by it because
nobody should have to put their life in their hands to have safe transportation to work, not when a bus is available to take them safely.
it was so much worse than we really understood. Getting to work like they have to get to work.
How are you supposed to get home if you don't have a bus ride? How are you supposed to get there in the first place?
Well, surely we can do something about this. We've got to do something about this. This is just wrong.
And, I looked over at my friend Frank, who I work with, and I said, this is why we're here.
It's as clear as day. You know, a lot of community problems are complicated, and you're not quite sure what to do about them. Well, this was very clear.
She is the reason that we're here, and obviously it stuck with me.
We currently transport about 10 million passenger trips a year, and about 60% of those rides are going to and from work.
You know, 2/3 of the people that are getting on our buses every single day, they're going to or from work. That is what we do.
We have a very important role, access and mobility.
And the committee had done the research, and they knew that the vast, overwhelming proportion of entry-level jobs were at two places in the Miami Valley. They were at the Dayton Mall, they were at the Fairfield Commons.
What I didn't know is that they had a way of doing business, which was basically to put folks on the spot in front of a large group of people and get them to commit to doing exactly what they wanted. So I'm standing there looking out at this large crowd of hundreds of people, and the place went silent, and are you willing to change? Are you willing to help? You get 1,000 people looking at you, and you're the person with power, and you got 1,000 people looking back. There's some weight to bear. The minister forced the opportunity for me to explain my position.
So you explain to these people who are buying your product, you explain to these people who are your constituents, and you tell them why you can't do something for them.
We're happy to talk to you about it. These are things that I don't have the authority to do, but we would want to do some analysis, and then we would decide.
And so the whole lead group said, no, we have to do something about this. There needs to be a safe bus ride.
So before I went home that night, I came here and wrote a very long memorandum. I'm going to go to my board. I'm going to put this on the table and say, I think we should go for it. They gave us a green light, and at the same time, every elected official that we spoke to in Montgomery County said, yes, we support what you're doing. There was clearly demand, so we went in with the idea that in as little as 3 months, we could probably get bus service rolling along that corridor. And of course, that was the beginning of the process where we said, you know, so how do we do that?
And so we moved forward to connect with the Beaver Creek staff initially to talk about what steps need to be taken to have bus stops installed and our transit service diverted over to the Pentagon Boulevard area.
And we started working through the city engineer on the stop issues, the design issues, and the location issues of the stops.
The city of Beaver Creek, though, had a very, very rigorous list of criteria that had to be met before you could install one bus stop. It was very challenging.
There was a lot of pushback, but there was progress.
We complied with all of the requirements of the ordinance. Our I's were dotted, T's were crossed.
So we prepared for the public council meeting where we anticipated a vote, and it had been suggested to us directly that if we were in full compliance with the ordinance, that the council had no choice but to approve our application. That's exactly the way it was said to us.
Our first item up is a public hearing for the transit stop application. Is the applicant here to give the presentation?
When we got into the meeting, at that point I decided there's nothing really for me to say other than we are in full compliance. We'd like to move forward with our project.
Thank you very much for having us today, and thank you for considering our proposal.
Dave Beach, the city engineer, was asked to make the presentation. He did.
Through a number of iterations of the application to get to where we are today.
Basically said really all that needed to be said. He made it clear that we were fully compliant with the ordinance as he understood it.
Tonight completes the review of the application.
If we're compliant,
council action is per our ordinances.
It's decision time, folks.
I think that the plan that Mr. Beach worked on with the staff is the best alternative that we have. Given that, I would recommend approval of the plan as presented.
From the get-go, I knew that there was a law on the books and RTA met all the aspects of it. RTA has met the rules that Beaver Creek has set forward. They had to be approved. they have the right to be in Beaver Creek.
You know, the first time that there was a public hearing, kind of looked like the city council out there was going to do the right thing.
We've had many public hearings, applications, plans, ordinances, resolutions come through before us.
You know, I appreciate everyone being here and speaking to council. I really appreciate everyone's input.
In every instance, I've reviewed them thoroughly.
So in my estimation, there is a considerable amount of bus service from Montgomery County that already makes its way into the North Beaver Creek area.
I'm here to represent our citizens, as all of us are.
And then you saw this sort of 180.
I have not been presented with a case where this application presents any benefit at all to the city of Beaver Creek.
You know, the city of Beaver Creek did a huge survey on what our citizens want, and they strongly have said that they did not want this type of transportation in our community. And unfortunately, the people that have sent me letters in support of RTA are not from within Beaver Creek.
Majority of the city council did not hear that there was a law on the books and RTA met all the aspects of it.
One of the problems with surveys is that you do not know what was totally the basis upon which the person was thinking.
I sincerely believe they did not hear that.
Mr. McHugh, just to clarify, maybe I misunderstood the conversation regarding the law. As long as they meet the ordinance that we set forward, we need to approve that, right? Am I misunderstanding that?
Council can approve it, can deny it, can modify it. If council chooses to, the basis of denial, you would need legitimate, non-discriminatory reasons to act upon a denial, basically.
And what might those be?
I certainly would have no problem providing to council legal guidance with respect to these issues. I think in fairness, I would prefer to put that in writing and not do it off the cuff tonight.
Would a simple motion to table suffice?
That'd certainly be appropriate. You do have 45 days.
I think they still thought that they could make some changes to the ordinance.
Yep. And we said we need to consult with legal, and we need to find out where we stand. What is our position? What can we do or what can we not do?
I think the pertinent thing for us to do right now would be to table this. I don't want to make a decision tonight. I don't want this to be an emotional decision.
And that's when you got the sense that there was a real problem here.
I have a motion and a second to table the action on transit stop application. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
6-1, motion carries.
Immediately, the issue kind of became real public, the fact that the RTA wanted to take buses there, but the city of Beaver Creek was not embracing the idea. That became public and obvious.
Mr. Mayor, I had one change on the bottom of page 5, or on the middle of page 5, where we were talking. It says the plan presented was the best alternative they had given the law and was doable, and she recommended approval of the plan presented.
There was a time when I had hoped that Vicki Jambrone might be the champion on that council.
I think what I said is that I recommended that we consider the plan as presented, not approve the plan as.
Okay.
A lot of people aren't aware Vicki worked for RTA early in her career.
The law says we, as in City Council, are only in control of the design standards within the right-of-way. And our vote isn't about whether RTA can come to Beaver Creek.
She knows what RTA does and how things go and what happens with bus service.
We can only control the site design standards.
And that's when we went down that slippery slope where, my sense was people started looking for methods within the ordinance to say, you may be compliant, but you're not.
And if that is the case, I want to ask staff to look at all the applications, all of the pages of the application to address my concerns.
Or we can find a way for you not to be compliant by adding other conditions.
What are the ridership surveys? What are the employment surveys?
This was a delay tactic.
What is the analysis that justifies this expense?
It was, let's not move forward with the application process.
And all of a sudden, they're cooking up all these reasons not to do it.
Quite frankly, I think the buses that are proposed for this, which are the very large-scale buses, I think they're entirely too big.
And dreaming up all these unreasonable conditions to impose.
I think we had issues about security, the issues of public safety, increased pedestrian traffic there. And then I would also like to look at the options that have been actually agreed to in other municipalities where there are many cities who require video cameras at bus stops. And so I wanted to ask them to look at that as well.
I would like to see this on a closed loop. I don't want to see what happened at a bus stop 24 hours after it happened. It's a safety issue, but it has to do with the design of the stops.
So additional design requirements that I'm asking staff to look at, if we agree as council to do that, would be lighting, cameras, fencing, and queuing. Add that to, we got to have an agreement on that.
The first list had 19 new requirements that the council felt they had the right to add.
So I think there's a lot of things that need to be looked at, and Jerry's mentioned some. We've all mentioned items that need to be looked at.
And I think before we would pass this, I believe that we need to look at the bus stop shelters.
And I know a lot of people deny this, but there were full climate-controlled bus shelters demanded in that list of 19.
That we look at environmental controls. And that would be heating and air if that's going to be necessary.
Which, we only found one air-conditioned bus shelter on the planet Earth, and that was in Dubai.
We would sit at a meeting and we see all these fancy papers and know that they're talking about hundreds and thousands of dollars of bus stop fancy stuff.
So to do all these other ridiculous, extraordinary things were obviously just attempts to derail, the eventual service being located on the street.
And it's a bunch of nonsense.
It was a situation that just, the reality of it communicated itself very clearly and very widely to the community.
All right, if you'll jump through this hoop and spend all this money, then maybe we'll let you put a bus stop here. And it was a game like that.
Even though the language being used to turn down the buses was very coded. It was all about crime.
It's hard for me to understand those who suggest that Beaver Creek citizens have no good or reasonable basis for the concerns, given all of the issues that have been at the Salem Mall, the Dayton Mall, and downtown Dayton.
But when they started speaking, they said, we don't want our community turning into the Dayton Mall, the Salem Mall.
I want to be sure that we safeguard our citizens' interests.
So we didn't bring the issue of race in. They implied it by their statements.
That doesn't mean that the people on the bus are bad. It doesn't mean that the bus is bad.
That the people they were talking about were centered in the African-American community.
These are not manufactured concerns, and they're real and they're well documented, and they need to be discussed.
I had tried so hard to explain why it was important.
All these topics that you're bringing up make it sound like there's a lot of fear, and I think these buses won't just have criminals. These are going to be regular people.
Mrs. Van, excuse me, Mrs. Van.
They just didn't get it.
The opinions of the majority of the residents and their perception of RTA and its impact on resident safety, adverse impact on economic development.
They kept saying, it's not prejudice, not prejudice. Then please tell me what it is. What is your fear?
As a result of that, potentially impact the quality of life for the citizens.
People are coming out to spend their money in your community.
And I cannot see in the future me looking back and my decision causing Pentagon Boulevard to be the corner of chaos. So, thank you.
I would say I found most offensive the meeting, I think it was the 28th, where each council member was reading these emails and giving their positions and talking on and on and on.
I received 157 emails, calls, and letters, and out of the 157, 10 people said yes, and 147 said no to me.
And to hear this select group of negative comments coming from emails that people supposedly received.
It is of the people, for the people, and by the people.
My guess is all that total was probably a tiny little fraction of the population of Beaver Creek, and yet we're going to go through this, and it was quite a show.
I don't care whether it's federal money, Montgomery County money, local money, or state money. It should be about, that's all our money.
And that's what this is all about. The people of Beaver Creek, in my opinion, have spoken, and they have spoken very loudly, politely, but directly to the point.
But no one else in that room was given an opportunity to speak prior to them taking a vote on this issue.
Resolution number 1133. It's a resolution by the Beaver Creek City Council approving an application by the Greater Dayton Regional Transit Authority, RTA, for the location of certain public transit stops in the city of Beaver Creek.
And I will please ask for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Howard?
No.
Councilmember Petrak?
No.
Councilmember Wallace?
No.
Vice Mayor Jarvis?
No.
Councilmember Giambrone?
No.
Mayor Hadley?
No.
Between that first public hearing where it looked like the city council was going to do the right thing and the final meeting where they voted 6-0 against allowing the buses, so much of that public conversation was in coded racist terms.
I'm disappointed in your vote today on the bus stops. I don't care how many people called to tell you they didn't want this.
I don't know who you're talking to, but we can always find people that believe in what we say.
I think you needed to show some leadership. What kind of people are we going to be?
Maybe the people that are speaking to you have collected together because, yes, they have the same values.
People in the community had no problem discerning what it was really about.
It's just thinly veiled discrimination. That's all it is.
But you're hiding behind elections and political beliefs.
Very thinly veiled.
And so you realize that the issue we were dealing with here was race.
It's good enough to have these people come out here, serve our food, empty our trash, scrub our toilets, but they're not good enough to have a safe, affordable, dependable ride to work.
When you raise your right hand as a public official, you are swearing that you're going to uphold the laws of the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And to have those officials become an enemy of the people, it was totally unacceptable.
I'm Wilma Ryder, a member of LEAD, and our issue remains safe, affordable transportation.
I don't think people know what racism is.
And it's not safe.
I don't think they understand it.
So that issue for us has not been resolved.
In terms of its, political or sociological roots.
And we're going to keep pressing that issue one way or the other. Thank you.
Even if they said we didn't mean to discriminate against people, that was not our intent. The line got crossed.
It's all the assumptions that people have, and it's all the dirty tricks.
Someone should have been responsible enough to say, we need to negotiate what's right. And no one in the city of Beaver Creek's government stepped up to do that.
At that point, it was becoming really clear to us in the research we had done that if RTA took on this Beaver Creek issue by itself, we would probably never prevail. For the simple reason that in legal terms, we were not an affected party, and we couldn't be. We're a bus system, we're a public entity. There's no negative impact to us that we could argue that would win the day. We needed someone who is directly impacted by the city's refusal to let us on Pentagon Boulevard to be out in front. And I think the folks at LEAD, they didn't need my help. They immediately said, this is why we exist. You know, this is a cause that we believe in, and we will take this on.
When we got to know, obviously the news media jumped right there on it.
And new at 11, the bus stop battle in Beaver Creek.
We're going to have to wait even longer for bus stops?
Yes, we were frustrated.
The council unanimously rejected the application.
Yes, we couldn't understand.
Residents argue the decision made Monday night, it's discrimination.
There's always that kind of thing like, should you just cut your losses and move on to another important issue? And it was like, for me, it was no.
Battle over more RTA bus stops in Beaver Creek is far from over.
Group leaders for Equality in Action in Greater Dayton, also known as LEAD, say the bus stop is about improving lives.
Can't discriminate from those who are seeking jobs, who are seeking health care, who are seeking to expand just to live.
LEAD says it's not about the bus stop.
It's really about the human beings.
There are jobs here. People want to get to those jobs. That's all we want to do.
I think it's a death trap. I did know something about how to take the issue and make it public.
They have a right. We believe they have a right.
And put on pressure.
I think we ought to be very straightforward about this.
Things that would be focused and hard-hitting.
They don't want the people who ride those buses in their community.
We strategized understanding that we needed to regroup.
So I showed up for the committee.
And we got together to figure out a new strategy. Well, we need to go take this higher. We need to expose this more.
And there we were, sitting around this table saying, well, what are we going to do and what are we going to call this?
So we did letter writing campaigns to local, state, national government.
How about that line from Go Down Moses?
We made phone calls. We flooded phone lines to state senators. We did interviews with anybody that would listen to us. I mean, we did everything possible to make sure that this issue didn't die.
Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go, let the people ride. And that is what the group became. We began to design what would be a public campaign.
So who's going to be the voices? If we really want this action to happen, LEAD, speak up.
Sometimes you just have to get tough.
LEAD had made a request to the city of Beaver Creek to do kind of a parade over the bridge.
Imagine the human bus, a group of 50 people walking across Colonel Glenn Highway, across 675 from the last bus stop to the Fairfield Mall.
And the response was given to them that it was not safe to do that. And I said, well, gee, did you get that in writing from the city? Because that's the whole point of what we've been talking about for 4 years.
Whether it rained or whether it shined, on Saturday, on Sunday, men, women, black and white, multicultural people joining hands with us, holding signs of pickets.
One of my favorite signs that came out of this demonstration was, we are those people.
There was a little boy, Caucasian boy, and his mother and father. The little boy told his mother, I want to stand with him. He grabbed me by the hand. And we stood there with our sign. And I'm sorry for getting choked up, but this little boy was as proud as he could be waving his sign, shouting, let the people ride.
In that campaign, we attracted the attention of the lawyers from ABLE.
Meeting the civil rights attorneys, that was probably the greatest godsend that we've had.
The lawyers called us and says, okay, this is a civil rights issue. We think you have a case.
There really were some things in the law that we might be able to work with that could add something to the overall campaign. We came upon Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which says that if you're accepting federal benefits, you're not discriminating against folks based upon race or national origin.
I was very surprised that they came up with that reason. They can't do that. That's not why we decided it. I didn't think they had cause.
We're not claiming, And we didn't try to show that there was a discriminatory intent. That's really hard to show.
But in the first place, there was never a Title VI even considered. Never, ever was that discussed at all.
What we claimed and what we showed was that there was a disparate impact. In other words, it's a way of proving discrimination when you don't have overt statements of intent. Beaver Creek is 3% African American. The city of Dayton, where the bus that they wanted to run there comes from, is more than 40% African American. More than 70% of the riders on the RTA buses are minorities. So the statistics make it very clear that if you bar buses from your community, you're going to have a disparate impact on minorities.
And so, so they were justified in filing a complaint the way they did.
By seeking relief from disparate impact, really what you're doing is you're taking into consideration the historical context within which something exists.
The way cities are built, the way schools are built, there is an institutional side to racism all over the country.
So there's a history that resulted in African Americans living on the west side of Dayton and being unable to move out of the west side of Dayton for a really long time.
If you take the benefits and if you take the privileges, you can't just say you can't come in.
Even if there's no overt reason why you can't move out anymore, that's the reality. And we need to be able to recognize that in our law. So if you have rules that say it's going to be hard to get from West Dayton to where the jobs are, maybe even if there's no intent, it has a disparate impact because of the history of housing and development, and et cetera. Because otherwise, we have no ability to overcome our history.
The complaint was actually sent to us in August. I began my federal tenure in September of 2011, and it was one of the things that I inherited when I walked in my office, a pile of paper, and one of those papers was this complaint against Beaver Creek.
The approach that the attorneys at Able Law took going to Federal Highway was brilliant.
The Federal Highway Administration is created to develop a nationwide highway system. Our mission is to provide funding and financial and technical support to state transportation agencies. Currently, we have an annual budget of about $40 billion to develop and maintain our network of roads and bridges throughout the country.
Beaver Creek was developed on the dole. I don't think they want to admit that, but they got a lot of money.
And we did our research and discovered that money that we provide to the Ohio Department of Transportation actually filters down to Beaver Creek's Department of Public Works. It wasn't clear why they had determined not to have any types of bus stops intersecting this community. So I immediately dispatched an investigator to go to Beaver Creek and to meet with the complainants and to do a thorough investigation to determine the merits of that issue, that complaint.
Warren Whitlock, our Associate Administrator for the Office of Civil Rights, determined that he wanted to have the investigation conducted out of our headquarters office, out of the Office of Civil Rights.
We talk about civil rights from the standpoint of people being compliant and doing the right thing. At the end of the day, we want entities, we want municipalities to do the right thing.
Our ability as Federal Highway, if we were to determine that the process had a discriminatory impact, we would then request the city go back and redo it in a non-discriminatory manner.
If there are entities that are, reluctant to doing the right thing,
should we find a violation,
we have the hammer of withholding federal funds.
I scheduled the on-site visit for early April of 2012.
So they brought a team basically to our community and did, I'd say, an exhaustive investigation, talking to every involved group, especially the impacted parties. They spent a great deal of time here at RTA and then with representatives of the city as well.
Based on those conversations, it wasn't very difficult to determine that these people had a legitimate issue.
And we hope that the agency would address it.
Our lawyer said, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do with them? And we said, we want to take them on a ride. We want to take them on the route.
When I arrived, initially they took me from the Wright State University to Pentagon Boulevard, across the overpass, across I-675, and where they had wanted the 3 stops. Then later that evening, they held an open forum.
The investigators showed up at College Hill Church in Northwest Dayton, where we had hearings, and people got up and gave their testimony.
And it was packed. Of course, the media, any amount of the media was there.
Civil rights leaders, community members, and RTA bus riders joined forces to speak their piece in front of a civil rights investigator from the Federal Highway Administration. He's here to determine if the Beaver Creek City Council violated civil rights.
There were 250 people there who got up and could say from their own life and from their own frustration what it meant that they couldn't have a safe bus ride.
People should not have to turn down any job, especially in these hard economic times, because we do not have the means to go to and from work.
So that was very helpful to give me an understanding where persons who didn't have cars of their own, transportation of their own, as to what they were facing.
One of Lester Finkel's associates said, we're running out of time, And it was funny because he just sat back and he looked at them and said, I want to hear everybody.
My role as the investigator, my role was to establish the facts. So I asked each of the council members and the mayor and vice mayor, what did you base your decision on? Documentation, information, what informed your decision to vote as you did on the application?
Here are how my bosses, the people I report to, the citizens of Beaver Creek, have asked me to vote.
The transcript and the videos had shown them to speak to this informal survey they had conducted of the citizens, the residents of the city of Beaver Creek. When I conducted the interviews, knowing that, I then asked them the basis for their decision.
John P., no. John R., no. John and Deanna, no.
82% of our citizens have stated in surveys that they did not want the RTA.
And when I wasn't hearing the informal survey, I brought it up.
And it's not 50-50, it's 82%.
I read the transcript, I looked at the videos, and I noticed that you had indicated that the survey was very important.
Linda, no. Lisa, no.
And the members indicated that either it had no additional weight.
Michael B., no. Michael S., no.
Or did not weigh at all in their decision.
So that is the deciding factor for me, is what do our citizens want?
And yet, on the video,
they've said it in the survey,
and in the transcript,
they've said it in the letters that I've received.
It was very evident that they were speaking to this survey as the public is speaking out and they're against it, and so therefore we're against it.
And so I have to look at our constituents that put me in this office.
At this point, I'm siding with our citizens. Thank you, Mayor.
One of the major themes I heard from all the council members, including the mayor and vice mayor when I interviewed them, was they didn't get ridership information by the Regional Transit Authority.
I've asked for a ridership study, I've asked for some public safety studies, and I don't have those.
I haven't seen any estimates or even a wild guesstimate as to how many people they're going to transport from Montgomery County to Greene County.
And so it's difficult to make any kind of good decision without data. So that's my position.
So I showed them the letter from the RTA, and I showed them the answer, about 75 to 105 persons per day. They said they had not seen that. The second meeting, after the second meeting, is when the city council, with the mayor and vice mayor, requested numerous additional items that the RTA needed to address before the city council would even entertain voting for it.
There are some significant design requirements that we haven't addressed to this point.
It was evident that that the city was attempting to add as much as they could, and hopefully the RTA would, go away.
The last thing he did before he left the city and went back to Washington was to get on foot and walk the route.
So I then took a disposable camera and walked the overpass. The overpass itself is not built for pedestrian access. There are no sidewalks, there are no striping. It's built for just vehicles, period. And while I was going and coming back, there were at least 3 people who walked it at that time, and I took a number of pictures which were then used as part of the report.
And then they just, they kind of went back to DC and worked on this for a while. We didn't hear from them for months.
We went through all the alternatives. We went through every possible perspective that the city council could have designed. We looked around the country to determine if there had ever been a violation of Title VI and what the grounds and the basis were for those.
They didn't really have a track record of dealing with these kind of complaints, so there was no way of knowing how they would deal with this.
We did not have an internal precedent on which to stand.
We didn't expect a lot.
The first question that came back to me from my chief counsel was, Warren, this is your decision. How do you want to proceed? And I said, I had to think about it, because there are, Federal Highway is not a compliance organization. Federal Highway, as I mentioned, our job is to help fund and maintain roads and bridges. With these civil rights offices, this is a really important aspect of our work. So I recognized that this was going to take us in a different direction. So I said, look, there's no other alternative, but I'm getting emotional. It's tough. There's no other, can we stop?
We did some follow-ups to the Highway Administration saying, how far out is this answer? When is this answer coming back? And we got some information, well, it's still pending. Well, we know it's pending, but how close to pending, for or against? Please don't forget us, because the weather's getting ready to get cold again, and we still don't have buses.
We found out that people were predicting that we wouldn't be able to fix it, that we're not going to be successful on this issue.
I was sitting in this building with a meeting of the joint committees of my board, and I had my iPad up, and I saw, boom, there's an email from Lester Finkel at dot.gov. I said, oh my God, it could be the answer.
So from there, it was Secretary LaHood's concurrence with our administrator's decision that we go forward with a letter of non-compliance in Title VI.
So we made the announcement right there in the meeting. That the day had been won.
We were really pleased when the letter of finding came out, and it was as thorough and well thought out as it was, and that the mandate to Beaver Creek was as clear as it was.
Because this was the first time in Federal Highway's history that we had taken a Title VI complaint and issued a letter of non-compliance.
Our law firm was retained to evaluate the city's legal options in light of the Federal Highway Administration's letter of finding. My recommendation, as the council knows, is that you do approve the bus stops and the resolution before you this evening in light of the reality of dealing with where we are now, which is a finding by the Federal Highway Administration, the withdrawal of federal or state highway funding that is expressly mentioned in the letter of finding, potential references to the Department of Justice for further investigations or civil litigation, the possibility of heightened oversight by state or federal bodies of the city. I just thought it was important to make those points in the context of the city's obligation to meet the deadline set by the federal government in this case.
Of course, Beaver Creek pushed back, wasn't happy, but that's to be expected.
Sometimes we find that there is reality that gets in the way. $10 million or so a year from the federal highway.
Unless we want something catastrophic to happen in our city with our finances, that we don't have a lot of choices here.
The golden rule comes into effect. He who has the gold makes the rules.
You know, you wish that in approving it, they would have acknowledged, you know, the problem with their prior process and prior result and indicated that they'd learned some stuff. That kind of stuff seldom happens.
Having said that, it's now time for a vote.
Councilmember Literal?
Yes.
Councilmember Upton?
Yes.
Councilmember Wallace?
No.
Vice Mayor Petrak?
Yes.
Councilmember Hadley?
No.
Councilmember Jarvis?
Yes.
Mayor Giambrone?
Yes. Okay. City Manager's report.
From that moment forward, we started to plan how can we move to implement the stops. Our goal was we wanted to start service immediately if we could.
January, I think it was January 12th of 2014, is when they started the bus service on a Sunday morning or bright and early. The executive director drove the first bus.
And they said, well, you know, it's going to be first trip on a Sunday morning. I said, who cares? After 4 years of this, I would love to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday and go do this. Got up Sunday morning, and it was very emotional. Everybody at RTA wanted to be a part of it. Everybody did. They had a special bus done, and so many people showed up. So they were lined up in the bus garage. I said, well, let's get going. We've got to get out of here.
And then the lights went out, and the engine started, and the bus began to move. I don't know, there's a sense of unreality, like, is this really happening? We're in a bus, and we're gonna go over 675.
So we hit that bridge. I don't know who started it, but
that bus just exploded.
I looked up in my mirror, and people were back there singing.
Song and chants and clapping and the singing. People are just elated, and the bus would have to come up, up, up. And we were on the overpass. And somewhere off there in the distance, what are those lights? Is that the mall? Is that the mall? Yes, that's the mall. And we were going in. We were really here. And we really came on a bus, and we got here. We got here safely.
It was an emotional moment for everybody on the bus, and certainly for me, the most emotional bus drive I've ever had in my life, and perhaps the most enjoyable.
It was a great day. It was a great day. It was a great ride. Who would have thought, in all the working and the fantasizing and whatever, you just never thought it would be this big, and it was huge. I hope we didn't frighten the guy who was getting a bus ride, you know, to work.
I mean, it's really cold outside, and it's a 1.1 hike from the bus stop down there to here, so, I mean, it means a lot. I work here about 6 days a week, so it means a lot that I don't have to walk to and from that other bus stop.
But for the rest of us, it was like, can you believe this?
I really didn't know it was this much support behind it until this morning when I got on the bus and I was actually going to work. It was nice to see positive people doing positive things.
People saw that happen, and people thought, that's great. Look at that, man. People are actually winning. If you get a group like Lee, a small, determined group, like Margaret Mead once said, who wants to work hard and fight hard on an issue, they can overcome some pretty significant odds and achieve something significant and important. That's a great lesson.
I mean, municipalities around the country have been calling our division offices, asking them what they need to do to be in compliance with Title VI. I would venture to say 80 to 90% of federal recipients do not understand their responsibilities under Title VI. And our job is to help them see what the right thing is to do.
I have no interest at all in judging them as individuals.
I objected to it being built. It got built.
The decision they made initially was a very bad decision.
So, and I've not been on the winning side of a lot of things that I've voted on.
I mean, people are seldom as bad as we think they are or as good as we think they are. People are complex.
And that's okay.
To the extent some of their ideas that it was going to bring crime to the community, they're now learning that that doesn't follow from bringing buses.
I mean, I don't think anybody should feel bad about it being there.
And hopefully the entire community is learning something from this. We're seeing all these Supreme Court decisions, knocking down the Voting Rights Act, impacting other civil rights rules that are based upon the idea that somehow we're in a post-racial discrimination world. And that's not true.
Because for me, through this whole thing, I never lost the picture in my mind of that little pregnant woman in her, I knew, minimum wage job, trying to help her family keep their family afloat. She deserved a safe ride to work. And I wanted that ride.
A young man looking for some extra money and started driving a school bus for additional money in Omaha, Nebraska back 38 years ago. So what I didn't realize at first was the reason they were hiring was they were about to embark on a program of desegregation in the Omaha public schools. So I was involved in the very first trips of desegregation of the Omaha public schools as a bus driver.
In the 1950s and 60s, it was about whether or not you had the opportunity to choose your seat on the bus. And today, it's really about whether or not the bus is going to come to your neighborhood and whether or not the bus will take you where you need to go, essential places like work.
Cases like this one in Beaver Creek are critical to lift up for at least 3 reasons. One, it allows other communities that may be victimized by policies that have a disparate impact to be aware of their legal options. 2, it might incentivize the federal government to step in other areas where they have not in the past, and to be as aggressive and forthright as we've seen the Department of Transportation, Federal Highways Administration be in this situation in their findings. 3, it helps to educate and inform local and state governments and other recipients of federal aid of their obligations under civil rights laws, in that they cannot have policies that are neutral on their face but disproportionately harm certain communities.
I just want to let you know I won't give up that easy.
We work with our state and our local partners to ensure public safety, to work out any issues that might arise, and it's actually very productive and very positive. From time to time, though, there is a role for the federal government to step in and correct perceived wrongs, and that is something that was demonstrated quite strikingly during the civil rights era, when the federal government played a huge role in correcting racial disparities. The need for that has diminished, I would like to say, since the 1960s, but it's still there. And sometimes they're blatant violations, sometimes they're not so blatant violations, but we are the backstop. The federal government is the backstop to protect civil rights. And understandably, local governments and individuals may not like the federal government coming in, but that's our duty under the laws. And that's something that we will continue to do as necessary.
We are survivors. With this love, they'll never getting nothing back. Yes, I said we are survivors. With this love, they'll never get.
There will come a time when RTA is going to ask for more stops because they can't be limited to Colonel Glenn Highway.